All right, it's 1:02, so let's get started. And hello, thank you for joining us today on our panel discussion, Open for Business in New York here. My name is George Diamond, and I'm the president of Valiant Technology. We're a managed service provider, but I'll get to who I am in a little bit. I think it's more important that we talk about what we're doing here today and how this all started. And the genesis of this was I found myself constantly talking to this great bunch of people on the panel today about my business and just talking about how we're going to start working. You know, these trusted advisors are so part of our day-to-day, and I thought, how great would it be if we could put together a talk about these are topics that are so close to our mind, you know, and I think that obviously we had some really great response. I have people from all over signing into this webinar, so we got some really great all over the country, not just New York. That's been really great. And so the topic that kind of came out of our conversations with our panel was around reopening our office and being open for business, and some of the other pieces about what's going to happen going forward, and how we're going to keep ourselves, our staff, and our businesses healthy and go, and just not letting it slow us down and move forward. So these are some of the trusted advisors from Valiant, and there's people I know that are great and they're experts in their field. So we have people from finance, HR, operations, IT, and business strategy. So I'm going to introduce our panel one by one and let them talk for 2 seconds about who they are, little introductions. So, Josh, please introduce yourself.
Sure. Thanks so much, George. Thanks for putting this together, and thanks for having me. I'm managing director at Norman Bobrow and Company. We represent tenants for their office and retail spaces in Manhattan. I've been helping tenants in Manhattan and the outer boroughs for over 11 years, and I run a broker development program within my organization. And it's been a very interesting time to talk CEOs and business owners through what's going on, through the unknowns, and kind of be able to give some advice as to how to prepare moving forward, given the current circumstances. Thanks so much for having me, George.
Thanks, Josh. Thanks for joining us. Michael, please tell us. Mike Gansel.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mike Gansel, also known as the seasoned voice of reason, and I'm happy to be part of this webinar panel. Thanks, George. Really appreciate it. So our mission at Voice of Reason Consulting is to turn business owners of small and medium-sized businesses into CEOs, helping them to make decisions for the real-life business issues they coordinate, they confront daily. So we do that by developing key performance indicators for sales, marketing, operations, and finance that are critical for their business. And I'll be talking about some business strategies later in the broadcast. Thanks, guys.
Awesome, Michael. Thanks a lot. Appreciate that. And I think next up is myself, if I remember correctly. I'm George Adams, as I said before. I'm the president of Valiant Technology. We're a New York-based IT managed service provider, which means that we're IT partner for many companies. And our goal is to make technology an enabling portion of your business, and this being that great partner for you no matter what happens. So with that, I'm going to introduce our next member of our panel, which is Brian Klein.
Thank you, George. Thank you, Valiant. Really pleasure to be here, part of this panel. I am Brian Klein. I am co-founder of Weinstein & Klein. I'm a labor and employment attorney, primarily representing companies, and I help them deal with anything and everything that's to do with employees. George has asked me to discuss some of the legal issues that are dealing with employment law, labor law, and HR. It's a really interesting topic and a conversation that needs to take place. So I'm happy to be here and discuss with you all. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian. And last but not least, Frank Morano, who is CPA and is an all-around awesome guy. So Frank, introduce yourself, please.
Hi, everyone. George, thank you for having me. And I am Frank Morano, I'm a CPA. We have a Long Island-based accounting firm, full service to small and mid-sized companies for a wide range of industries.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you,
George.
Oh, thank you for it was great having you here. And so thanks for everyone joining us today. We were able to put this together. Please give your time. Really appreciate it. And so a little bit of housekeeping. We're going to have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation around, and anything you like, please put them into the app, and there's a question section. And there will be recording of the event, and as well as the deck and a resource page that has a lot of information for you. So with that, I'm going to let Frank kick us off with finance. That's one of our topics that is on everyone's mind. So Frank, go for it.
Hello, everyone. what I like to do is I like to present the few options that the government and the IRS has provided us to help us in this crazy times. Basically, I'm going to try to compare the 4 or 5 programs that are out there and just put a little more emphasis on the 2 more significant programs. There are few, one of the components that a company can use is a payroll tax deferral, where the employer can postpone or defer the payroll taxes, the company side of the payroll taxes, and that's the FICA only, which is the 6.2% that we pay on behalf of our employees, and defer it for 2 years, where 50% of it will be payable at December 31st in 2021. The remaining 50% will be the following year, December 31st, 2022. The other one is a payroll tax credit, the payroll tax deferral is available to everyone. The payroll tax credit, it's available to companies that were either forced to close or partially closed due to laws, or they had a significant decline in gross revenue. By significant decline, it's got to be at least 50% of the normal revenue and analyzed by quarter. What that entails, it will give business a $5,000 employees per employees, 50% of $10,000 per employees, and to be offset against the FICA taxes, again, the 6.2%. The additional component in there is that if you're not able to utilize the credit towards your payroll taxes, you're entitled to a refund. And this is more for people that either did not qualify or did not receive the PPP loan or the EIDL loans, which are the 2 biggest sources of support from the government. So the other one is the EIDL loan, which is basically a straight loan. It's a loan up to $2 million, which can be used for accounts payable, payroll, and all health insurance and all other expenses. The requirements for that is there is a term of up to 30 years at an interest rate percent of 3.75%. There is a requirement for collateral if the loan is greater than $25,000, and then there is a personal guarantee required if the loan exceeds $200,000. The biggest and mostly applied for it's the PPP loan. The PPP loan has a limit of 10 million, or the lesser of 10 million of 2.5 months of average payroll for the company, with a requirement of less than 500,000 people. Not 500, I'm sorry, 500 people. If it's not forgiven, it will bear interest in 1%, and it will be paid, it will need to be paid over 2 years. For the PPP loan, there is a 6 months deferral while still accruing interest. For EIDL loan, there is a 1-year deferral, but it will still accrue interest. A little side note on the EIDL, when everybody applied, the original component was that you will receive a $10,000 advance, which will be forgiven. The SBA changed that because everybody was applying, and so what they changed it to is you would receive $1,000 per employee up to $10,000. The component of that will be added to the PPP loan to be forgiven. Right? So you cannot get both, by the way. Either you get the EIDL loan or the PPP loan. The PPP loan has the ability to be forgiven if you use to maintain your FTEs that you had at the time of the application. So if you had 10 full-time equivalents, you have to retain the full-time equivalents, unless you offer someone a job to come back to work for you and they refuse to work. It needs to be documented. It needs to be also the response for your employee needs to be documented. And I see that Brian is nodding because documentation, gentlemen, is the heart of the matter. So in addition to the PPP loan can be used up to 25% for additional expenses and very strictly qualified as rental expenses, utility, and interest on a mortgage existing before February of 2020. So the PPP loan is what's now, for most of the people that have received, it's time to be in compliance with. So the compliance requirements are that you have to have the full-time equivalent for 8 weeks. And one of the guidance that's not clear, it's now whether it's going to start once you receive the funds, or what about if you retain employees prior to receiving the funds. So that's something that's still not too clear. The loan can be also used for the health insurance and benefits, the pension benefits that we pay on behalf of our employees. There are a couple of components that one of them is on your certification when you apply for the loan, that it's creating some kind of uncomfortable feeling for some of our clients. When you applied for it, there was a one-liner that said that the current economic uncertainty makes this loan request necessary to support the ongoing operation of the applicant. And it's creating a little fear there because now they're saying what happened, you know, they're going to say, do you have to look at all your sources of revenue? I believe that the intent of that statement was to eliminate some of these public companies or companies that had a significant ability to have cash elsewhere. But unfortunately, when you cast a net, sometimes small and big fish will be included in there. So that's what's creating a little bit of the second component is that the IRS has come out with a disclosure saying that, yes, the loan is not it will not be taxable, but the expenses associated with the proceeds from the loan will be taxable. So there are several, one of is my AICPA society, where they are asking the Senate and the legislators to reverse the IRS stand on this. The IRS is known for going all the way up to the Supreme Court to defend its position. So I believe that at the end, the IRS will be much more in control of this, and their support of that is there will be double dipping. You know, you taking the money and you also doing the expenses. You also deducting the expenses. So if you receive the PPP, make sure that you have documentation. One, if any of your employees refuses to work. Two is that you have and most of us have like payroll services where they will be providing with the necessary documentation, whether it's the quarterly form, the reports. But in the next few weeks, I think banks will start sending you required documentation to apply, because you have to apply for the loan to be forgiven. Anyway, George, thank you for having on this panel. And thank you everybody for listening.
Yeah.
George, before we leave Frank, just one more thing, Frank. Might want to talk about the PPP in terms of forgiveness and also an inexpensive loan.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, there are two ways of looking at the PPP program, right? You can go for forgiveness, you know, you do 75% payroll, 25% expenses in the 8-week period. But you could also look at it as a very inexpensive loan, because you don't necessarily hit that 75 and 25 parameters. And so then it winds up that.
Well, absolutely. I mean, you know, the worst case scenario, and that's what I thought I was trying to make the comparison. Yep. The worst case scenario is that we have a very cheap line of credit for 2 years at 1%.
Correct.
So that's the bottom line of it. Great point, Michael.
Thanks, Michael. Yeah. So thanks, Frank. That's super information, the stuff that's super actionable. And I think that kind of leads us to our next part, which is the one that always gets everyone a little like tied up, which is human resources. So Brian, I'd love to hear what your kind of perspective of it.
Why do you have to tee it up like that? I'm the one that gets everyone tied up. We're starting with the CPA and the attorney, and we're already throwing both the attorney on the bus for tying up. All right, so I'm glad that Frank was talking about documentation. Documentation is critical. Like I said in my intro, this is a very interesting topic. It is a very in-depth topic. There's not a lot of time for today. So we're gonna focus on a very specific portion of this discussion, and that is really to address what is gonna happen when we are open for business in New York, as the title of this presentation describes. So you're gonna have employees come back. Maybe you got PPP money, maybe you didn't, you're an essential business, maybe you're not. In some way, shape, or form, you're gonna have your employees continue to work. If that is in the actual office space, if that is in a new remote office space, you need to adapt to what is going on. You need to do so being mindful of safety concerns, and of course, the legal issues and compliance. So that's what I wanna talk about. I wanna talk about policies, because there is no better time than right now to review your policies. Like Frank was saying, like I said, documentation is the most important piece of litigation, of compliance, and that's always going to make your HR better and run more efficiently. So why is it such a great time to review your policies right now? Well, the answer is because you need to create new policies pursuant to all the new stuff that's going out there right now. So for example, there's new leave policies, whether it's under the federal law. Here in New York, we have a state paid leave law that are all related to COVID-19. There are very specific laws and policies that are coming out that businesses need to adhere to that relate directly to COVID-19 that you almost certainly didn't have on your books beforehand. So you need to draft these new policies, and you need to deliver them to your employees. A lot of these new policies have notice requirements. The Family First Coronavirus Response Act, the FFCRA, we love acronyms in the law. That is a new area of leave. You got emergency paid sick leave, expanded FMLA. So if you have less than 500 employees, you're probably gonna have to adhere to this. You have to send a notice along with that. So you're giving stuff to your employees. Safety policies. So OSHA, CDC, there are requirements that you provide a safe workplace free of known dangers for your employees. What does that mean in this new, or I guess Gansel's telling me it's the now normal of COVID-19. Right. And how is that gonna look? At a minimum, you're gonna want to make sure you're adhering to proper CDC guidelines, whatever guidelines OSHA is distributing out. It's also good marketing, right? Both if you have a business that is going to have patrons or patients or customers that go to your physical space, you are not going to want to go to the business that is not advertising. We have cleaning, which I'm sure Josh is going to talk about later. We clean the office every night pursuant to CDC guidelines. We practice proper sanitation rules and sanitizing rules, all these various things that go into not only adhering to the guidelines and making sure that the workers are safe, but also that you're putting it out there, that this is a business that is complying and making sure and taking all this stuff very seriously. There's also probably going to be new remote work or work from home policies that you're going to have to draft. Again, even if you're having your employees come back, whether you're an essential or when all this lifts, hopefully in the not too distant future, you're probably going to have at least some employees come back to a physical workspace. Even in that situation, you're probably, whether it's staggering employees, changing the schedule, people are going to still work remotely, or maybe you're just an employer who's saying to themselves, all right, there were some hiccups here, but I don't hate this whole work from home situation. People are still pretty efficient. I want to make sure that I'm drafting policies that protect me, make sure I'm communicating effectively with my employees so everyone really knows what's going on. You got to create those too. So when you're creating all these new policies, don't forget to look over your old policies, and hopefully you're looking over old policies and not having to create new policies. But I have great news for you. If you do need to create these new policies, it's a good idea to speak with an employment attorney. We're nice people generally. We can help you with these policies. We can help you with crafting, relax, Michael. We can help you with crafting these new policies to make sure that you are doing it in an efficient and compliant way. A lot of topics and policies that were incredibly top of mind, not only 6 months ago, have really been put to the back burner. Sexual harassment. The deadline in New York State for sexual harassment training is like 5 months away. So all of these things you still need to comply with. We have not had any sort of directive from the state that's going to push these deadlines back. So you want to make sure that you're crafting these policies. If you don't have them, now's a good time to absolutely craft them for a number of reasons, and make sure you're getting it out there. Wage and hour issues. Not only do you want to be absolutely sure your wage and hour policies are buttoned up, you could be doing certain things if you have, let's say, remote work or work from home policy that fundamentally change the nature of an employee's position. Maybe that even goes so far to change that employee from an exempt to a non-exempt position, which is going to trigger a whole host of other areas of compliance you now need to be mindful of. So it's a really good time. You have to do this stuff anyway. So it's a great time to review your policies, look over everything, reach out to a professional. There's some great options on this panel, and we will help walk you through it. It's a really weird time, but when we all work together, we're going to be able to get through this.
Awesome. That's so great, Brian. And it's so like actionable, just doing the work and getting it done. So that's great. Excellent. We'll have some questions on that later. We see. And Josh, please kick it off into the real estate operations perspective. This is one that's probably close to a lot of people's mindset. So that's great. Thank you.
Sure. I think this is something that most business owners are really concerned about in terms of logistically getting back in the short as well as the long term. So I think I'll address it in those two kind of boxes. And we'll start with the short term, right? The first thing is that soon, within the next few weeks, depending on what type of business you are, you will start to return to the office. And the question is, how do you make your employees feel safe and comfortable to return? The first thing and most important thing is to make sure that the office is clean. All the surfaces are clean, and that you can communicate that clearly to your employees. To Brian's point, your workforce is the backbone of your business. And if they don't feel comfortable or confident that you have their safety in mind, their productivity will be down, and also the way that they look at you as an employer will be affected, right? So it's very important to make sure that all the surfaces are cleaned properly, a nightly cleaning to make sure that everything is done appropriately so that people feel comfortable when they're coming back in. The second item is really from a furniture standpoint. There are a lot of different types of companies that are offering furniture solutions to help mitigate, such close interaction between employees, right? And that's something that I think people are going to be doing. Especially as they look to kind of tier their employees when they're bringing them back in on a rotational basis. And I know that George is going to touch on some technologies that can be utilized to this effect so that it is organized, right? I think that's obviously very, very important. And the key there is to make sure that everyone is going in and coming out at a time that's comfortable so that they will be most productive, right? So that's kind of something on the short term. And don't forget, as an employer and as an occupier of office space in Manhattan or the outer boroughs, it is your responsibility to clean your space. The landlord will be responsible for cleaning the common corridors and making sure that the bathrooms are clean if it's a shared bathroom, the lobby, etc. They might even have different policies as it relates to elevators, right? How many people can be in an elevator at once? And that will vary based on the landlord. And so it's very important to understand what the owner of your building is doing and what you can do to make sure that you're putting your team in a position to operate in the most comfortable and confident way, right? So very important to talk to your building about that. The next question that we want to look at is, how are things going to look moving forward? The bulk of my clients do feel that they can have somewhat of a work from home policy that is broader than they had considered before. So how do you reduce your costs? How do you make sure that you're capable of doing that while also operating efficiently and effectively? And a few things that we looked at from that standpoint with my clients are subleasing a portion of your space, right? You separate a little portion off. If you can operate with 15, 20% less space, sublet that out, right? Bring some additional income into the business, right? Another option is if you're in a building, let's say you're occupying 20,000 feet, and now you feel that you can operate in 12 or 15, to swap space for a smaller space within the building, thereby eliminating that liability altogether and not being, beholden to a subtenant paying you the rent, right? And the other option that we've been exploring is subletting the entire space, right? if you're in a building that cannot accommodate that contraction to a smaller space, you can still limit your exposure by subleasing your space. And let's say you're operating on 15,000 feet and now you only need 10,000 feet. That's a pretty big delta in terms of how much rent you can receive, or sublease income to offset that, right? But I think it's very important to understand that I don't think it's a reasonable expectation that everyone is going to work completely from home. At the end of the day, we're primal beings, right? There's a herd mentality, right? People need to interact with one another. And if this quarantine has shown one thing, if above all, it's how much people are struggling without human interaction, right? And how are you going to maintain a team? How are you going to run a team? I have a number of friends who were onboarded to new positions during this period of time, and they said to me, "It's really weird. I haven't even seen my coworkers. I don't know what the culture of the company feels like," right? So I don't think that we'll move completely from having office space to zero office space, because I do think that it's important for people to interact with one another, and especially in those collaborative fields. So that's kind of a little bit about how I see it from the real estate perspective. And again, just to sum it up, make sure that you're communicating your protocols clearly to your employees. To Brian's point, very important to keep them in the loop, make sure they feel safe, and also integrate technologies, which I think George is going to talk about in a second, that can help manage these things in an efficient and effective way, so as to keep your business operation flowing efficiently.
Super, Josh. Exactly. I think it's some really super points. Part of such an insightful thought of like what the office footprint's going to look like, how we're going to operate, and I think that goes into something that has been on my mind quite a bit, and many of our customers as well. Is what does a permanent work from home scenario look like from a technology perspective? How are we going to incorporate all of the pieces that are required to deliver our work effectively, and to enable our staff to be just the best they can deliver. And there's so many different pieces to it. There's the fact that this was forced on us, so we didn't really plan for it in a way that was like a controlled response. It was kind of like, hey, by the way, work's shutting down, so we got to go. So now I think this is kind of going back to it, Brian, just to echo Brian about policies. I think that this is a great time for us to kind of revise our technology work from home policies in a way that are not just HR focused, but more like, what's the workflow? How do we deliver that collaborative environment in a way that allows us to be as effective as possible? And from our perspective as a technology firm, so much of it is not only just getting the work out there, but also giving a sense that it's secure, because that's a huge part of it, because now we have no border. People used to go to an office, sit down behind a firewall, and permissions, that sort of thing. It's gone. You're working from anywhere. That's the whole kind of thing. It's like anywhere is where you are. And so when you have anywhere work, you have to have everywhere security. That's how we're kind of looking at it. You have to be at all times with the mindset of security. And I think that that's one of the things that always suffers whenever we have to move really fast. And it's just, from an IT perspective, the faster you move, the less security you get. So we had to kind of really stop for a second, take a deep breath, and review our policies from both of work from home and from security. But in a deeper, kind of more kind of fundamental level of the human part of it, kind of Josh part, how will we work? How will we have our team scheduled to be on site together? Will we use hot desks? Will we use hot desk technology where we're going to have scheduling, where we're going to have people say, okay, today I'm going to be in on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, you're off on Thursdays and Fridays, and we're going to share a desk, and we're going to clean sure things are clean, the surfaces are prepared, that sort of thing. But even going a step further is when we are in the office together, how will we have the most effective use of our time, and having the technology reflect that use in a way that is consistent? Because when someone's working from home, when you don't know where someone is, you have to be able to be like, okay, they're home today, great. Oh, they're remote today, they're at a client today. So you really want to have that kind of overall mindset of, doesn't matter where you are, we can collaborate. But when you are together, it's special, and becomes like this kind of like uber a collaborative environment. I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but I think it's really exciting to kind of think about it. I know I speak with my team almost every day. I see them more now than I saw them in the past, but I can't wait to see them in person. I can't wait to collaborate with them and get the whiteboard, a real whiteboard out, and squeak along and that sort of thing, and make it feel so real. But I think that that's such an effective time. But and I think the final piece is, how do we measure using technology, the effectiveness of a person's workday. You know, so many managers and so many people, so many businesses just kind of look at like a shift. It's 8 hours. You show up, you leave. But now, if you don't necessarily see the person, how do you know they're effective? You know, in Valiant, we have a bunch of KPIs. We monitor a lot of different things. But we're lucky as we can do that. Our work allows that. How does other work do that? So I think there's a time for rethinking the strategy of KPIs and management of your business using better technology. And that tees me up to Mr. Michael Gansel, who's muted right now. I don't know if he's listening, but he's there. Michael, you're up.
You know, I've been listening very carefully and intently to Frank and Josh, Brian, and you, George. And, you know, it really what it's coming down to is that this is a sea change. This isn't just, you know, this is actually an absolute sea change. This is, and we talk about the now normal versus the new normal versus the now normal. But literally, in my experience, which is longer than I want to admit to, I think that the business challenges for small and medium-sized businesses are greater than anything that I have ever encountered in all of my time. So I think in terms of, you know, I have the first bullet point here, evaluate your leadership approach. Well, this really, we're talking about this now normal. We're talking about the culture of the business. We're talking about productivity. We're talking about collaboration between remote teams and people in the office. We're talking, I mean, it's overwhelming. And I really think that it's important and critical for business leaders to really see it. This is a different time. Business as usual is not going to work as we go forward. It just isn't. And, you know, in terms of documenting things, in terms of policies, in terms of space considerations, in terms of the productivity, in terms of is this a loan or is this forgiveness? All of those issues are multiple issues. And so, you know, I guess the next thing is, you know, what's going to happen when we do come back? Are you going to have revenue the same as it's been before? And so the question really comes down to, are you monitoring your cash flow? I understand you're taking care of your employees, you're taking care of your vendors, you're taking care of your landlord, etc. But you have no necessarily an idea as to what the business ahead is going to look like. So really, I think what's critical is you're going to really want to monitor that cash flow, maybe a weekly or a daily cash flow, so that you see what's going on, what's going out, what's coming in. Obviously, you're going to have to adjust sales and marketing efforts because you don't know, again, what your customer needs are. In fact, if you're in the office furniture business, you know, that's going to be some major changes, Josh, that you're talking about keeping a safe distance. If you're in the moving and storage business, what's happening there? If you're in the business of well, we know technology, but what happens if you're a business that's providing purified water? You know, what's going to happen there? I mean, is your business going to be the same? And if it's not, what can you do? And now we talk about pivoting. What can you do to basically bring in new products, new operations, new services to generate revenue if your old revenue sources are no longer sustainable? So, you know, if I were to summarize, basically say it's tough out there, and I think you really have to be working more closely with your CPA and accountant. You've got to be working more closely with your employment lawyer. You got to be working more closely with your technology provider. You've got to be working more closely with your commercial broker, because all of these things are much more important than they've ever been. So, you know, I think that really thinking that the new normal is there's no such thing as a new normal anymore. It's now.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know if I scared anyone as much as Brian or Josh, Frank or you know, but it wasn't my intent. But it is scary out there.
It's definitely, you know, it's a normal, it's a situation as it is. You know, we have to kind of all roll with it and change and kind of adapt both our mindsets and our businesses to where we are today. And, you know, the fear, and I think the reality is that things are not going to go back to where it was anytime soon. So let's all kind of assume that we're going to have this for months or years ahead of us and do the best that we can and implement different tools and policies and procedures and the whole piece to make it work and have this new reality. And there's so many pieces to it. I mean, I'm sure like all of us are kind of biting our tongues. We could talk for hours on end on this because it's like our areas of expertise. And, you know, unfortunately, I talk to my wife all the time. She's like, all right, enough of you with this IT stuff. So anyway, so you guys know. So anyway, I hope that if you got one nugget of information or something important that you can be actionable with, I think we did our jobs. And we're really happy that could be something you could use in your business, in your practice, or even your personal life. And you know, if there's anyone that could be helped by this information, please share this to someone. Please send it out. I said we're going to have the download, and so now we have a couple of questions that came in. So I'm gonna question it. I'm gonna ask as the kind of questioner. I know that's the right word, and put out that panel. So the first one's kind of a money one, and the question is, oh, I'm sorry, there's a resource on the document. I apologize about that, and that'll be in part of the deck. And so our questions are, first one is, should you put your PPP money in a separate bank account? I thought that was kind of an odd question, but I was gonna put it out there. So I'm gonna go into Frank, and what do you guys think?
It's not necessary.
Okay.
And, normally, a lot of companies have either an operating account and a payroll account.
Mm-hmm.
And being that most of it should be used for the payroll, you can put her into the payroll account. It's not one of the requirements, so it's not required to have it in a separate account. It's not that the money will be when you have to provide the documentation to the bank for the forgiveness of the loan. It will be basically the payroll records, could be the cash disbursement, but it's not necessary.
Right. That makes sense, Frank. That's good. Do you guys have any thoughts on that as well, or just kind of like it's more of a Frank thing, I suppose?
Leave it for Frank.
I almost feel like it's going to make it look more consistent to keep it in the same account, like Frank's saying.
I think so. So the next one I have is, what resources do I have to reconfigure an office? Are there companies I can reach out to, or do it myself? What do you know? What's kind of the consensus out there, Josh, that you're seeing? What are people doing?
Yeah, you know, I think that to begin with, when people are tiering it and having the adjusted schedule coming in, I think it might be a little bit easier to work without immediate changes. But I think long term, you're going to have to make certain changes. You know, there are certain that you're also going to see, you know, architecture firms. And I guess I'll avoid talking about anyone specifically, but you know, I have friends who are in the
Right.
architecture field who are happy to help you reconfigure and readjust your space utilization, right? And then again, to Michael's point, you know, Valiant, right?
Right.
You know, they're helping a lot of my clients with technology solutions to help either, you know, bridge that short-term gap, and then also, you know, make that remote working possibility a reality that's functional.
Right. Thank you. That's great, Josh. Yeah, I mean, we see a lot. We're trying to figure out ourselves how we're gonna. I know myself, our office. You know, we have an open seating plan. How we're gonna move that along. Another question that came in is that what tools beyond Zoom do you see strengthening collaboration at a distance? Slack, Teams, others. And that's not. I think that's more than just an IT question. That becomes like a policy question. You know, so Zoom is a great video conferencing platform. It's great. I don't think it's a whole platform. We really like Teams. We think it's great in terms of it integrates the video conferencing functionality with the sharing of files and data. So we think it's great in that regard. Slack is great for chatting, but doesn't have the video component. So you know, if you know, my preference, this doing a lot of Microsoft work and just putting things in that Office 365 ecosystem is Teams. It gets better every day. It's just not as strong in terms of the video conferencing component, but the sharing of files and data, it's amazing. So, okay, with that, our next question we have is is more for Michael, I think. What's the single most important activity, do you think, with regards to business strategy to concentrate? Like, where should you put, like, if you had to do, say, one thing to put your energy on, what would it be?
Cash flow.
Cash flow. Yeah,
Cash
I think
is
that's
king. Cash is absolute king.
I think Frank's, yeah. Sorry, Michael.
Well, no, I really believe that that is really where it's at, because we do not know what our businesses are going to look like when we come back.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
Former clients may not be there. Prospects that we thought we had may not be there.
Right.
So if you want to basically stay in business, I think you really have to monitor that cash flow more than anything else. That's what I think the number one thing. And that's tough for me to say because I'm not really, how do I put it? I like to invest and spend money.
Not save it. I got you.
Not save it.
Sense.
So this really is the time to just save it.
Makes sense. And I think one of our last questions here, what resources, how should I feel about people choosing not to come back? That's more of a Brian question that kind of came in. And that one's like a really loaded one. I'm sorry, Brian, I give you a kind of zinger at the end. I apologize. Got it twice today.
I'll throw it right back to you because it is a loaded question. And the answer, as it usually is with questions to lawyers, it depends. It depends on the specific employee. It depends on the specific company. Just a quick example, what is the reason the employee does not want to return? Is it because of a disability? Is it because of just the general fear and the unknown? Is the fear related to a disability like anxiety that is now manifesting itself because of what's going on, which could potentially be a disability? Is it because they live with someone who is otherwise more susceptible to either getting the disease or just developing more serious symptoms and consequences from it? So it really depends on what's going on. I think the most important take-home point and as an answer for that question, communicate effectively, make sure that you're engaging in a dialogue with the employee so that everyone is really seeing both sides. There's always two sides to a coin. There's going to be two different perspectives. An employer is probably not trying to screw anyone over. They just want to start and operate their business. And an employee, if everyone is scared and everyone is trying to do their best and control what you can control.
Great. That's a good point. So I think with that, I'm going to wrap us up today. So once again, if anyone has any topics or anything they'd like to kick to us, we would love to put it together. Really appreciate you attending. If you have any questions, we do a bunch of different webinars and Q&A sessions, so you can put the questions there. And I want to thank Frank, Michael, Brian, and Josh for joining us today. It's been great working with you guys today. It was great putting this together. It was a lot of fun, and I hope that we can do this later. All right. Well, thank you so much. All right.
Thank you.
One more quick shout out to George's marketing and IT team, because they were super instrumental in putting this all together, and we're very appreciative to you, George, and to them as well.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, guys. All right.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Take care.